And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Put your thumbs up and say it's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, Tickety Boo, everything's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, son. Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tickety Boo. Today we're exploring something that's often misunderstood, and that's avoidance. We think of it as a choice, a personality flaw, or someone who's just not caring enough. But what if avoidance isn't just a choice at all? What if it's actually a survival habit, wired into us by fear, past pain, and emotional self-protection? That's what we're unpacking today. So Iona, when you hear the word avoidant, do you think of someone cold and distant, or someone who's scared and overwhelmed?
It can be both, either or, and it can also be happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important. So I'm really glad we're talking about this topic today.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about avoidant, when we're not about beating up a personality style or a behaviour, it's actually about creating awareness around these responses, because as somebody who spent a large point of their life being emotionally avoidant, I didn't know I was doing it. It's very much an unconscious response, and it was a lot later in life where I got awareness around the actual issue. As he said in the opening credits, the response is a survival strategy more than a personality trait. People who are struggling don't choose to shut down. They've learned to, normally because reaching out doesn't feel safe, so they've stopped trying to. Growing up, what did you learn about asking for help or needing people?
I didn't.
Yeah.
So my avoidance, I remember my dad saying to me literally when my parents were going through a divorce in the 70s, it was not a good divorce. It was could have been a Hallmark Channel movie, and not the warm and fuzzy kind. And I'd been asked by the lawyer who I wanted to live with. And at this point, I'd stayed with my dad, and my brothers had gone off with my mum. And the lawyer, I'd said I wanted to live with my mum. The lawyers obviously told our parents. And then my dad was waiting for me when I came home from school, crying because I'd said that. So then, and I know in that moment, because I've had a lot of therapy around this, that's when I decided I couldn't ask anybody else for help. I couldn't voice how I really felt. I had to make sure everybody else was okay. And from then on in, and we talked in the last episode when I was like, yeah, I'm fine dealing with, all the deaths. Yeah. I know that that's how it manifests now. It's like, I'm fine. I just have to get on with it. Everybody else is more important than me. So I would avoid those situations.
Yeah, pretty much the same. I kind of grew up with a mindset of be low maintenance, stay off the radar, don't expect anyone to show up for you. So you learn to not ask for help or express emotions. If I'm being brutally honest, that was normally in fear of what the response would be. Sometimes the fear was just simply, well, what about if they say no or they reject you? That's absolutely crippling to deal with. And I think for me, my wound, because I'm really interested in what makes us even become avoidant. What was it that made you become avoidant in the first place, do you think?
Not feeling safe. So my needs weren't getting met. As I've shared, like I was the eldest. So my needs not being met. So therefore, I'll just avoid that because then I don't feel worthy, beating myself up. Yeah. How about for you?
Emotional inconsistency. As a young child, circumnavigating parents divorcing and separating and not understanding what was really going on, being the older of me and my brother, trying to figure that out. It was definitely that early stage in life where you're like, I don't know how to be an act. And if you never knew which version of a parent you were going to get, you know, whether they were distracted, busy with work, or they were angry because they're dealing with their emotions. I just kind of unconsciously learned that, you know, I can't rely on these people. I'm not saying they're bad people.
Yeah, this is because also we internalize things very differently when we're children.
Yeah. So what I did in my childhood is I became somebody that suppressed or avoided conflict and conversation.
Yeah, the people pleasing as well comes in there too.
Yeah, keep everyone happy. The fixer syndrome, savior syndrome. Keep everyone happy, scan the room. Anyone's unhappy or doesn't look happy, become the court jester, make everyone happy. And then you're safe. But that involves you having to put all of your needs last. And also, it also means that you end up tolerating behaviors and stuff that weren't right. So you kind of shrink yourself down. You tiptoe around moods. If someone was in a bad mood, you would totally tiptoe around it because you didn't want it to turn into attack for you. So you kind of just learn that being invisible is safer.
Yeah. And now with the clients that you work with in the therapy room, do you find that there's more avoidance, like with people having been through COVID in the last, like, so it's brought up those behaviours? So.
Yeah, you know, one of the things we do talk about in the therapy room is about how this shows up in your adult life. You know, for some it's avoiding the difficult conversations. For others it's chronic people pleasing, putting everybody else first, which leads to burnout and overwhelm, stress and anxiety. Other people, it is self-sabotage and blowing up the very thing that they think they're looking for, but when they find it, emotional safety and consistency, it feels unfamiliar, so they destroy it.
Yeah.
And they stay trapped in a ever-repeating cycle of devastation and blowing things up. You know, when you hear the word avoid, you naturally think, well, I'm just staying safe. But you don't actually realise the damage to you, the world around you, but also the other people that the avoidance can do.
Yeah, and it can manifest in, if you're avoiding confrontation or you're people pleasing. We're not even talking about the freeze or fawn aspect. The way you communicate is affected. So that's going to affect your relationships. It may affect how you make business decisions, how you parent. It comes into all areas of your life because it will manifest and come out in there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for a lot of people with avoidance, closeness, even though they crave it, feels really unsafe. I've actually, last year I was working with a client. Her husband was a very successful musician. Lovely guy, everything that she ever wanted, but she kept in contact with an ex who was toxic, treated her badly, and she came to me, she goes, I want to stop doing that. And she's like, can you just erase this person who's toxic for me out of my mind? And it's got nothing to do with erasing the person out of the mind. It is that actually the right thing for you doesn't feel safe. Because chaos is familiar for you. Have you noticed how you start to push people away when they feel comfortable and familiar? We talked earlier in the episode how peace for some people is like, I don't know if I like this. I need to blow it up. I need a bit of chaos in my life. And really what she was addicted to was the chaos and uncertainty because she knew how to handle that.
Well, it felt familiar. That was her comfort zone, even though we all know that's not comfortable or healthy. Yeah.
And from an outsider, you can sit there and go, oh my God, this person is just like, what on earth? But you don't actually see on the inside of that, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of turmoil. And by the way, this doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It happens in friendship groups, family members as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. We've been talking about how we avoided and how we interacted in situations which we learned in childhood. What about, Andy, for people who maybe had a parent who was avoiding them and was emotionally unavailable to them?
Well, the reality is the byproduct of that is you're probably going to become avoidant, especially when a parent's not emotionally
Yeah.
available or there's emotional neglect. So you might do subtle things like ghosting a friend, or completely withdraw after a deeper level conversation. Or maybe you've been away and done something really nice with family, friends, or a partner, and it's been lovely. And then you just feel like my nervous system's really dysregulated. I need to escape. So it's that need to pull away.
Yeah, well, it's as you were just saying, if we've just done something lovely with our friends, or if we've
Yeah.
had that deeper connection, because another thing that can happen is that the vulnerability hangover.
That is so true. But if we lean back into everything we talk about on this podcast, is we are running away from discomfort.
Yeah,
Fear. Everything comes back to fear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you can get someone who's avoidant, who wants to flee the situation, and then you can get somebody who's very anxious, like a people pleaser, who wants to lean in and fix and discuss. Weirdly, both of those two people, the avoidant and the anxious person, have the same issue.
Yeah.
They feel emotionally overwhelmed by the situation. One wants to flee, the other one wants to lean in and fix. So, you've probably heard of the push-pull of an anxious and an avoidant person. It's like this tug of war. Funnily enough, you both want the same things, but one's behavior is the mirror of the other, and it kind of blows the whole situation up. And that, in your daily life, costs. It wreaks havoc. But a lot of people don't even realize they're doing it. They just think that's the way that I am. I didn't realize it. I was anxious in some areas of my life, and I was avoidant in other areas of my life.
So what's an example of something that you have been avoidant in as your adult life?
I'm avoidant. I was avoidant of anything that could lead to potential conflict, because dealing with high emotion was a big trigger for me, or anything where there was a sense I could be rejected or abandoned. What about you?
My avoidance has been, it's losing control. And we know control's an illusion. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
It would be, so I've talked into it. Technology, it seems like something so ridiculous, but there's so many things when I get overwhelmed, and so I want to avoid them. So I will put off things that I know need to get done.
Yeah.
Like for my business, like there's certain things that are non-negotiable. I have to do accounts, which I've actually outsourced. That was the first thing I did. But knowing where my strengths and weaknesses are, and how I process this, and I don't know how many other people who are listening, sometimes the thing we're avoiding, actually, once we do it, it takes, it's super quick. We just need to do it. But then also the thing we're avoiding, like what we resist persists. So if it's that difficult conversation, if it's a decision we need to make, it's not going to go away. So we need to lean into it, and we need to ask those uncomfortable questions of ourselves or the other person.
So if you recognize that you've got patterns of avoidance showing up in your life, what's a way that you use to break that pattern, recognizing that you're in it?
Well, I love that you said basically all these avoidance techniques that we do as humans, it's fear. And it reminds me of Marianne Williamson, where she talks like all there is love or fear. So that's the extremes of the like emotional resonance scale.
Yeah.
And so we're either in fear or love. So yeah, and then we've got like all these emotions in between, and there's like all emotions are valid, but it's to look like, where am I on this? Am I coming from love? Am I choosing love for myself? Or am I fearful and sticking and staying in fear? What choice am I making?
Yeah, for me, I recognised the patterns because I felt like I was hiding or running away from my truth. I was suppressing. And by the way, that behaviour showed up in procrastination, in sending emails, responding to messages, making choices about doing things, saying no to things you've been invited to.
Oh, yeah.
Even stuff that's good for you, but you're just so busy. So as the chronic people pleaser, I'll go, yeah, I'll come and do that. Not a problem at all. And you're like, oh my God, I've got so much on my plate. Why have I just said no? Because I don't want to let that person down. I don't want that person to be disappointed.
Yeah, and for me, as an example, with where I'm saying, am I choosing love or fear? It's having those uncomfortable decisions and knowing that my feelings are valid. So instead of saying, hiding away or being confrontational or taking care of everything because, let's say, somebody has said or done something that's made me upset or angry, instead of saying I am angry, like I can check in with myself, and it's like there's a part of me that's angered, or you've said this and this is how I've internalized it. So coming from a place of love for myself and the friendship or the relationship, however it is. Obviously, if it's a business relationship, you're not going to say, I'm coming from a place of love. I would like you to figure out my taxes. But it's also, how can I be loving and kind for myself rather than staying in that fear and that avoidance?
Yeah. And until you stop running, nothing can actually change. And, as we've talked in the last episode, you need to stand in the discomfort. You need to lean into the discomfort and stay in situations where you'd once run. So for me, I had to start really small. We've talked about this before in the past about how I would say yes to everything. Even if somebody phoned me and went, can you give me a hand doing this? You're like, yeah, no, there's something else on my plate. I started small with saying no felt massive to somebody that would always said yes. So I started off with, listen, I can't do that, but I tell you what, here's what I could do instead. So there was no, and it allowed me just to flex a bit and get comfortable in not saying no, but offering an alternative, and the alternative wasn't taking up. And from that, I then adapted to, somebody asked me to do something or go somewhere. My next statement was, I've already committed to so much stuff at the moment. I'm going to have to pass this time, but thank you very much for thinking of me. Much softer no. And it felt so much more my truth. Even though it still felt uncomfortable, I had to be able to do that a number of times in order for me to stop the patterns recurring.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. If you just hope that one day you wake up and you figure out how to stop doing this stuff, it doesn't work like that. You have to recognize the patterns in your life where this is showing up, and then you need a strategy to decide not to run, but stay in the discomfort. Don't think by fleeing that self-care. Because it's not. It's actually you abandoning you, and you're isolating yourself, and you just end up feeling, instead of peace, empty. Staying in the moment, stay in the discomfort, because do you know what? That's where good stuff can actually start to happen to you.
Yeah, that's where the growth comes from, being in the discomfort and stepping into it, as we talked about in the last episode. Getting outside that comfort zone. Nothing
changes if nothing changes. And it's no different. You're working with the brain, but when you go to the gym and you start working out, it's uncomfortable. The weights get heavier, the distance gets longer, the treadmill gets quicker. It's uncomfortable. You can feel it, and it's exactly the same. But if you're listening to this episode and you're like, do you know what? I can see avoidance strategies and patterns in my life. The key thing is to recognize is that you didn't choose to become avoidant.
Oh, another way of being avoidant, though, is also being super busy.
Oh.
Before we sign off here, let's because that's been mine.
There's no one more busy than an avoidant. Jobs, cleaning, moving, sorting problems out, working.
So choosing to be busy and making yourself busier is also an avoidance thing. So that you can't go to that meeting, so you can't go to that party, so that you so you're not going to be in an environment to have that uncomfortable situation because you're busy over here doing something else. I'm not avoiding you. I'm just busy.
Yeah, I'm just busy. But that's you adapting and surviving, because that stuff feels unsafe. So you sort that by unplugging from it, disconnecting from it. But that doesn't have to be your story.
No.
But you do have to choose to stay in the discomfort to learn to stay present, to regulate your emotional system, to stay open even when you are scared. And that it does involve doing the work.
Yeah.
Sometimes that involves some therapy, looking at the trauma, where it comes from. Because you do deserve to not feel like you need to run and hide and disconnect and stay in the moment and have experiences. But that fundamentally starts with you deciding not to flee or shut down or get busy or avoid the uncomfortable conversation or procrastinate, whatever it is. So if you're listening to this episode and this has struck a chord with you, look at the patterns. Look where the discomfort is, look at what you normally do and start to come up with a simple strategy to change what you always do so you don't get what you've always got. Yeah. That wraps up this episode of Tickety Boo. As always, thanks very much for watching and listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
If you or someone close to you needs to access mental health support, please contact your GP, or if it's out with normal office hours, get in touch with NHS 24 on 111. Alternatively, contact the Samaritans on 116 123. All calls are free of charge from any phone. You can also find more support information on the Tickety Boo website, ticketyboopodcast.co.uk.